boom. Oh, wait, like literally officially a boom. I love that. So,
Yep.
Tarah, hi. How's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
But lovely, lovely. So, as we were just talking about, forgive us, the Blue Angels are overhead. So if it's like noisy, but it's San Francisco and we have a lot going on. So, I want to take just a couple of minutes. A lot of my clients know I am passionate about nutrition. We all have our own sort of nutrition background or nutrition story. They know that I love to give like general advice, like general wellness, what is caloric balance, like generally how much protein do I need for my goals and things like that. But there's largely like a lot of things that I just don't know the answer to, and I would prefer to outsource that stuff. So I was really grateful that I could snag a couple of minutes of your time just to kind of give folks an idea as to what it's like to work with a nutrition professional, like what's in store, like what does your process look like? And then maybe we can get into like some specific things that are top of mind for a lot of people right now. Like in my world, protein is a big deal. Perimenopause is a really big deal. Like we're all getting old. It's like one day I wake up and like so many of my clients are like talking to me about these things. And I'm like, oh God, we're old. What happened? So let's start with just introducing yourself a little bit and talk a little bit about your company and like what you do. And we'll go from there.
Sounds good. So I'm Tarah, Tarah Valenti. I'm a registered dietitian. And I've been doing this for, I think like 7 or 8 years now, I want to say. It's hard to keep track. Yes. Well, I mean, we do have it. Yeah, you can say it. I'm not going to say it. We do have quite a strict credentialing, background to get the RDN after your name. But basically what that means is that I have a lot of experience in terms of like clinical stuff. Like I had to rotate through all of the medical specialties and all of that stuff and go to college for this. And, there's a strict criteria that you have to meet to become an RD, but that sort of just lays the foundation for what I actually do on a daily basis, which for the most part in the setting that I work at CustomFit. It's a gym. Most of the people that I meet are coming in for DEXA scans or coming in for personal training, and they're really interested in either changing their body composition or optimizing their health, specifically for things like longevity. So I spend a lot of time talking to people about those things, and over the years I've gotten very, very good at helping people to do both of those things or a combination of the two. And then there's so many other things that people are working on from a nutrition perspective too. So, a lot of people come to me with GI concerns and GI issues and inflammatory bowel disease and things like that. So kind of balancing those more specific needs with what everyone wants, which is to, optimize body composition and just feel really good and look really good in their bodies.
That's cool. So, and I've saw a nutrition professional many, many years ago. And I'm sure some of the things are the same, but like, talk to me a little bit about like, okay, sort of like, like with a trainer, all right? Like, you either buy a package or like we do an assessment when you sit down, and here's what I ask of you as a client, and here's what you get as a client. Like, talk to a little bit about like, okay, like someone knows what their goal is and like, I'm ready. What is working with you look like?
Yeah, so kind of the process. So it always starts with a free consult. Like I really like to get to know people before we engage in work together, because we might not be a good fit, so it's important to kind of get to know each other's personality and what our individual strengths are and what the goals are looking like. And then we decide together if we want to move forward with working together on a nutrition plan. And from there, everything is very customized to the individual. So typically we do packages. So packages of, let's say, 4 sessions or more. And we work together for several months. So I actually use an app. It's called Better, and it really is better than most of the apps out there. It's really cool. It's designed for nutrition professionals. So I'm able to, if we're tracking nutrition, they're tracking everything in the app. I can run analytics on the things that they're tracking. So check for any specific nutrition gaps or anything like that. There's a chat function. So in between actual sessions where we're meeting and talking, we're able to stay connected. So it's very hands-on, but generally it starts with creating what I like to call their nutrition roadmap, which is going to have all of their custom recommendations based on what their goals are, and more specifically, like how we're actually going to achieve those goals. So everything's very, very clear cut, which is what a lot of people are looking for. They want direction. They want to know exactly what to do. And that's where we start. And then there's the other piece of it, which is the actual doing it part, which, like anyone can have a plan, but then when you actually try to execute that plan in the real world with life and work and kids and, all of the chaos, that's the part that I feel like really sort of sets me apart and the other practitioners at CustomFit. We're really good at helping people navigate this stuff and make it actually fit into their life so that they see success. So that's really kind of how it looks. Is we start with that free consult. We talk about what's going to be best for them. We decide if we should be tracking nutrition in the app or doing a meal plan or doing something a little bit more intuitive where we're focusing on more on like mindful eating and things like that. And then we move forward with a very structured plan that also includes a lot of, I don't want to say hand holding, but like collaboration so that we're able to set them up for success moving forward.
I love that you said that. So like, and I like your app, but I use like we all know the other one, the MyFitnessPal one. And I love that. My husband and I use that. My husband and I are one of the like smaller percentages where that I'm finding that really works. Like I love tracking my food. I track my food all the time. I like it. I love the data. I love looking at you mentioned like, it's not just about calories, but looking at like my protein. I love looking at my vitamin C, my iron, like makes me, and I like playing with my menu as a trainer. And as you and I were talking before we started, like I used to do more direct nutrition coaching, and that was my tool. Like that's my tool. And I know how to do that, but I'm going to be on like the majority of clients that I introduce that to, like won't do it, don't want to do it, start, stop, hate it, just hate it for years. And for those people, like me as a trainer, I'm a movement professional who like knows about nutrition. So like, I love that you said all of those other things. Like what kind of tools can we like do you beyond just tracking your food? Because obviously even like as an RD, like you want to know like your iron and your this and your that's too. But like for those clients that have a mental, emotional, like whatever it is, block to doing that, are not successful at that. I love that all of those other things that you mentioned, because I don't have those tools, and I know people need those tools quite a bit. Like and like also like, I have had clients where I've introduced that to, and they have had a history of eating disorders and disordered eating in the past, and we're like, oh no, then you can't have that. Don't do that. Like
no numbers. Yeah.
No tracking for you. And it's been lovely. Like, and so, yeah, then we do talk more like recipes and like, higher level stuff. So I love that. Talk to me a little bit about, and I also heard in there, like the thing that jumped into my mind is like, you still have to like eat well, but I heard you can still go out and eat dinner. You can still like have a glass of wine sometimes. Like you can still like, what I love about tracking food, or what if it's mindful eating or whatever, like what I think successful eating looks like is eating really well, like eating the things that are good for your body. And I do want to talk about some like specific, like newer recommendations for those things, because it's like always changing, right? But also like having a little bit of fun too, right? Like some clients, it's a glass of wine a couple nights a week. For my husband, it's just like weird. He's eating like the same raspberry cookie like every night for his like entire life. He's got to make room for that thing. For me, it's dessert as well.
And that's key right there, what you just said, like making room. And I think that the sustainability part of a nutrition plan is exactly that. It's making room for the things that bring you joy in life. And you're right, everyone kind of has a different thing. For some people, it's their cappuccino, for some people, it's a raspberry cookie or whatever it may be. But where we run into trouble is that kind of all or nothing mindset of like, I need to be 100% on or 100% in it, or not at all. And if you sprinkle in those indulgences along the way, you're a lot more likely to see success in the long run.
Let's talk about, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask like a couple of specifics. Like in my world, like 10 years ago, we would always say like alcohol. People are like, I'm not giving up my alcohol. And I, full disclosure, I'm in recovery. So I'm so, bless me, grateful that I don't have to be part of that debate. I'm like, I just can't drink. So it makes my life way easier. I'm like, but I watch a lot of people struggle with that. And obviously like, we're going to like remove just distorted drinking, or not distorted, destructive drinking out of it. But like, I'm curious what like an RD says to people these days about alcohol, like how it used to be like media and nutrition would be like, yeah, there's room. There's a certain amount of alcohol that's healthy. And lately it's more like, no, like don't fool yourself. It's poison. It's carcinogenic. It's terrible. So like help us understand like where you are in that.
Right. Okay. So I have to preface this by saying I am a healthcare provider.
Yes.
And I do have a code of ethics I have to follow. And based on the research and everything that we know about alcohol, what you just said is very true. It is a carcinogen. There is not a safe amount that can be recommended for anyone to consume. So I have to just inform people that, if you decide to consume alcohol and you want to incorporate that as something that you use as, celebratory beverage or a treat or whatever it is, you just have to do that in a way where you're informed, about the risks and the health implications that are involved with consuming alcohol. And we just try to minimize that as much as possible. And it is totally a personal choice. Each individual has kind of like what they want to prioritize in their life. And for some people, that's a glass of wine or a cocktail here and there or whatever it is. But when we start over consuming or consuming regularly or making a habit out of it, that's where we're going to actually start seeing some problems down the line, or even in the immediate. So I think you just have to kind of weigh out the cost risk benefit, and figure out what's best for you. And I do get asked pretty regularly, like, what are the best types of alcohol to consume and things like that.
No brown liquor. Like, what about light beer? Tell them Ritual, because there's zero proof. I've been loving the rise of mocktails now. Like, restaurants want our money and they're tired of us buying Diet Coke. And so now they make some pretty tasty mocktails. And I bought this Ritual as a brand, and I took it to a barbecue, and it's like the fake bourbon. And I mean, it doesn't get you drunk. So I realized, like, I used to drink a lot and I loved bourbon. It turns out, and this stuff tastes like bourbon. It's creepy. And like half a glass, and I'm like, man, I'm done. So it is funny when people are like, oh, I drink because I love the taste. I'm like, no. Remember your first sip. Remember your first sip of any alcohol, you probably wanted to throw up. So but I love that you said that. And then I think, and I just closing the chapter on alcohol, because I also want to talk about like processed foods and like ultra processed foods in a bit. But I do think, like, previously, I think when we were looking at alcohol, it was more around like calories in, calories out. And like, there is a room, like you have a fun budget, right? Like every financial budget has like fun. And if you want to use your fun on alcohol, sure. Like you can successfully drink. And I have seen people successfully drink what you or I would say is a lot and still maintain or even lose weight. But I think the real danger and the real problem is what we see, what it does to the body as a system, how it negatively impacts sleep.
Right.
How it negatively impacts like metabolic processes and like the actual like cellular health of your body, of your gut, of all these things. And
heart rate variability, visceral adipose tissue. Like, there's so many things. And I'm also a DEXA tech, so I do DEXA scans here at CustomFit. So I look at visceral fat all the time. And for anyone who is listening or watching that doesn't know what visceral fat is, I'll just define it really quick. Visceral fat is the fat that's in your abdominal cavity surrounding your organs. So we know that if you have excessive amounts of visceral fat, you have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes and all these chronic conditions that you really just don't want. And we know that alcohol consumption and processed foods tend to increase visceral fat. So even if you're able to lose weight and still incorporate alcohol in your diet regularly, there's other things that we know that are not benefiting from that regular consumption. So I encourage people to look at it more as a treat if they do choose to drink, and definitely not a regular habit. Not to like make anyone feel bad if they do choose to drink. That's, again, totally a personal choice, but we know that it's not going to benefit your health in any kind of way.
And I'm glad that you mentioned like high cholesterol and high blood pressure and all those. And So in addition to, because you mentioned you work with clients, obviously people want to lose body fat or build muscle. Those are like really common. Me too. And then people, I love that you said vitality, sort of like the Peter Attia readers of the world. Like that guy definitely, whether you like him now or not, if he drives you crazy now or not, he definitely ignited a lot of people to care about their lifespan and their quality of life, which I really appreciate. But then also, like, do you work with people on those specific issues? Like I have, like high LDL or my blood pressure is high. How can I approach, not only from exercise, but through nutrition? Like, can you work with people in that area?
Oh, definitely. I feel like that is also my cup of tea. It's just so common. So many people have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, elevated A1C. Those are things that we see really, really commonly. We also do blood work at CustomFit. So depending on what we feel like might be appropriate for someone, we can test all of these things. We can look for progress down the line, kind of do like a pre and a post. What's cool is that we are able to actually see if our interventions are working, right? So we get a baseline measurement, whether that's a DEXA scan or we do blood work or we do a VO2 max even or something like that. Mm-hmm. We then make a bunch of changes and optimize things. And we're able to actually see like, wow, your A1C is normal now. Your cholesterol came back down. And obviously you can do those tests at your doctor's office too, but regardless of where you're doing them, it's a pretty cool to be able to actually see the interventions like actually working and improving people's health. Like you said, body composition and having more muscle mass or getting leaner or whatever is great, but at the end of the day, if your body is not functioning well, that's a bigger problem. So we always like to look at those things too, and definitely that's something that I work with people on pretty regularly.
That I love that, because I think we all, like, even if you're the healthiest person in the world and you're trying, and like things come up, right? Like, I'm 45. My LDL finally crept up. One of my best friends is a cardiologist. Like, I mean, I've tried. I've had the calcium coronary test. I've had DEXA scan, all these things. And like, I ate oatmeal every day for a year. I did like all the things. And, like some things you can control and some things you can't. So, but it's really nice, like, to have the measurement and to know like what impact what you're doing is having, and to mm-hmm. sort of exhaust all of the things that you can through a lifestyle perspective. Like many things we can control. And then sometimes, they're not. And then you need to up level and go to the doctor and like look at medications.
Right.
And things. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's genetics at play too. So much of that is out of our hands. But imagine if you didn't eat oatmeal for a year, right. It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. Well, I'm so mad. One of my clients, Lynn, I love you, Lynn. Like, she told me she had high LDL around the same time. She's like, I just started eating oatmeal and it's like totally normal now. And I'm like, I'm so mad at you, but I'm so happy for you.
Yes. Well, I mean, there are other things you can do besides oatmeal, I'm sure, yes. As you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
But yeah,
I teased that one
because
I hate oatmeal, and I ate it every morning anyway. It was so gross. Let's talk a little bit about, we touched on it briefly, but ultra processed foods. And this might sound stupid, but can you like can we talk about, and can you help people understand like the scale of processed foods? Because there's like, I think many people know like ultra processed, like I'm going to pick mm-hmm. on like Doritos and Skittles and like the shit that's like not a natural color kind of processed. And then like processed, like what is that? And like what's safe, what isn't, and sort of like what is a health, like sort of like the alcohol conversation, but around mm-hmm. like processed.
Yeah, I mean, this is another kind of nuanced. So much with nutrition is nuanced, right? There is a spectrum when it comes to processed foods. Technically, baby carrots are processed, like
that's right. I mean, that's right.
Yeah, like they go through processing, but it's also a whole food. So you can have it be a hybrid too. So it's not just like as you pulled it out of the ground, right? It's been processed a little bit, but it's still also a whole food. So that's like one end of the spectrum, things that we've altered a little bit just to make them more appealing or whatever, but they're still great for you and there's nothing wrong with that. And then there's sort of like the middle of the road where some things maybe been minorly processed. Yogurt would be an example of that. Like humans have to make yogurt. Yogurt does not just come out of cows, and then you can kind of go on up from there. A lot of it is basically looking at ingredient labels and identifying like, okay, this processed food, let's use Triscuits as an example. Triscuits, I think they have 3 ingredients in those crackers. It's oil, salt, and wheat. That is it. The oil they use, maybe not the best quality oil, right? But in the spectrum of processed foods, that would be on the, sort of more processed, like unrecognizable cracker, type food. But if you're comparing that to like a Dorito or maybe some other types of crackers that you might be choosing between, Triscuits are actually not the worst thing. And then there's, like your Pop-Tarts and stuff like that. The thing with processed foods and the reason that they get so much negative attention is because they're typically high in inflammatory or potentially inflammatory saturated fats or oils that might be hyper processed and things like that, or a lot of refined sugar, and then preservatives and ingredients like that, fake colors, like yellow number 9 or whatever, that might not be ideal for us. And so if we think about it in terms of that, like if you're trying to minimize your consumption of things like sugars, things like excessive saturated fats, things that are maybe chemicals that you don't necessarily recognize, that's an easy way to identify foods that you should steer clear of, because those hyper processed foods are going to be high in all of those things. And the foods that are kind of on the other side of the spectrum, not going to be high in those things necessarily. So you can kind of have to think about what's in these foods and why we should be avoiding them, and not just think like, oh, it's processed, so it's bad. Why is it bad? What is in it that is not good for you? Or I don't like to categorize things as bad, but maybe something that would be more of like a treat food that you would consume only upon occasion, rather than something you want to incorporate in your daily routine.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Everything is nuanced. And I'm always like you, like, every once in a while you just want a Dorito and it's fine. But I also depends too, like if you're the type of person, I like what you said, like, is this something you want to put into your diet regularly? Like I do work and have worked with clients over the past, like meal prep had a moment, and now it's like everyone's kind of like, oh, who wants to do that? And everyone's busy. So like, I often tell people, like, you don't have to do all your own cooking. You can buy stuff pre-made. Like there are lots of options, and it sounds like, you help people navigate that as well. Like
Totally. Yeah. It is so okay to lean on processed food sometimes. It can be a better choice. Like if you're, in between your lunch and your dinner, right? And you've got that big gap and you're just starving for something like a snack, and you bring, let's say, a protein bar with you, and that keeps you from going to the coffee shop down the street and getting like, something that might be way less ideal, like a big cookie or something like that. It's give and take, right? Like that choice is going to be better than the choice that you would have made. And even if we're just improving by like 1 or 2% a day, that still adds up, right? So it's not so much about being perfect all the time as it is about making the choice that's better for you in the moment. And sometimes that is, something that's a little bit more processed, and sometimes it's not.
do you find like there's also things that like have a moment and then don't have a moment, and like are lauded and then vilified? Is and I'm old, like calorie counting or like tracking your food. Do you find that obviously there's so many things, right? And this is just whether you want to like lose, like everyone wants to lose weight, maintain weight, or gain weight. Like everyone wants to do one of those. And I find for me, I find knowing, again, like general norm, like non-distorted, not like non-eating disorder history, like totally okay for you to like get in the numbers, based off of your psychology and your background and your experience. But like I find when people do sit down and like kind of balance their budget, just like log in the app, you said it's better is what it's called. Yeah, like when they log it, like they come, and I don't know if this happens to you, but people tell me like a large portion of what they need to know. They tell me, they're like, oh, I tracked my food for a week, and like I'll print it out and I'll be like, all right, like what did you see? And they're like, I don't eat any vegetables. Or like once I had a person say like in a meeting, I don't have a sweet tooth, I never eat dessert. And then he was like, I ate dessert 5 times this week. I like literally didn't know. And so I do think it's interesting that like, I am a big fan of mindful eating, right? I love that idea, and like, listening to your body's cues and all of that. But I also know, like, I feel like sometimes like that's an advanced strategy, right? And to get to mindful, we need to like do an assessment, do an inventory.
Yes.
And
Oh
so
my God, yes.
go ahead, sorry.
I love that we're so on the same page with that, because what I really like to do for folks, and not for everyone because everyone's different, but I find myself doing this really often. Maybe they hate tracking. Most people do. It's a pain in the butt. But
Yeah.
I tell them, let's do it for 2 weeks. That's it. I just need 2 weeks from you. We're going to learn so much in those 2 weeks. Like, you're going to reveal things about yourself you never knew before. Like you mentioned, like, I don't have a sweet tooth. And then you find out that you do. Or, wow, I never hit my protein targets. Or, geez, 65% of my calories are coming from carbohydrates and I'm not an endurance athlete. Things like that. And so after that 2 week period, I can kind of help them figure things out. They can help themselves figure things out. And then we step away from the tracking. We take what we've learned and we start focusing on adding those things in that we're missing, taking those things out that were maybe a little bit too much, and focusing on those softer skills like the mindful and the intuitive eating, and kind of incorporating it all together. And for some people, we need to track a little bit longer, for some people, a little bit shorter before they can kind of graduate onto that more mindful and intuitive eating style. But I love that progression, because you do have to have that kind of baseline foundational knowledge about your intake before you can move on and eat intuitively. It's kind of like step one.
I agree. I agree with that. I would be remiss not to ask, and I also want to be mindful because I know I've got you for a limited time. As I mentioned, like the last couple of years, like perimenopause and menopause have just been like much more front and center, which is great.
Mhm.
Part of that is like we're all just getting a little older, and I've trained people for a long time. And it's like, oh, we're going through this, and like the old stuff stopped working, and now we're doing new things. Both from and it's fascinating from an exercise perspective. Like clients, I'll use one as an example. I've trained for like 8 years. Used to teach group fitness. We trained forever, and we could do like, like always lifting heavy, but not like crazy heavy, and doing lots of cardio, like spin classes and running and tennis and da, 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 da. And now, because things, she would keep continuing doing the old things weren't working, and she was getting frustrated. And so we read Stacey Sims' book. She wrote a book about like how women should lift, right? And like lift really, really heavy. And like we completely like dug into all the new content and new information coming out from doctors about like doctors who are studying exercise specifically and how to change their program. And it's fascinating. It's great. And it's working, which is so cool. But I'm less knowledgeable about like the unique challenges that population face from a nutrition perspective, or if there are any, if it still is kind of like business as usual. If there's any like sort of top of mind things that come to mind, like, oh, this is a big issue with nutrition and women, going into perimenopause?
I really think with this topic, nutrition and fitness they're so connected, and they always are in every human body, right? But especially with menopause and perimenopause, because we need the metabolism to be functioning at its absolute best. And that's where people often struggle during this phase. But everything goes kind of haywire. And if you are not adequately muscled, it just makes things 10 times harder. So there has to be that fitness piece. And if we're talking about supporting muscle mass and lean tissue in general, the nutrition side of that is optimizing your macronutrients, making sure that you're getting adequate calories, adequate protein, and making sure that the other two macros are balanced. And of course, looking at all the other, aspects from a nutrition standpoint as well. But where I see a lot of women struggling is that they're noticing that their body is changing. They're noticing that they're accumulating body fat. And so they start to cut their calories. And they cut them down and they cut them down and they cut them down. And then they basically they're up against the wall. We can't go any lower because that would be unhealthy, but they're not losing weight anymore. And so their bodies are in essentially like a fight or flight mode because they're inadequately nourished. They're exercising really hard and they're not seeing any results, and they're frustrated. And for a lot of people, for a lot of women who are in this stage, I have to convince them to eat more. That is like, yes. It's like you have to be fully nourished for your body to be functioning at its best. And you're putting in all this work at the gym and you're not reaping any of the benefits because you're not nourished. You have to increase your nutrition. And that is where sometimes it's just hard for people to wrap their mind around, like, wait, but I'm trying to lose weight and you're telling me to eat more food. And I'm like, yes, please trust me. And so that's a big piece of it.
And this is for both perimenopausal and just general. I've always told people in my personal experience, like as a trainer, we're terrible. We can distorted eat negatively too. Like in my 30s, oh, I could be on a 1,500 calorie a day deficit. As a 35-year-old male with lots of muscle mass, I could do that to like get photo shoot ready and to like, don't recommend it. I'm like, I tell people, most people can't do that, but some people do have the willpower to do it. But as you mentioned, if you don't have a lot of muscle mass to come, like it just ends up being terrible. I always recommend or tell people that 300 to 500 calories, if you're trying to lose weight, a safe window is 300 to 500 calorie a day deficit. Any more than that, and you're getting into it's too low for all the reasons we've talked about, you know, and much less than that, you know, it's not going to be very effective. If that is that still like a safe recommendation in general?
In general, yes. It also depends on the person's goals. Like I see a lot of people who are trying to increase muscle mass and lose body fat at the same time. And so with that, the window gets a little bit smaller because we want you to be maybe in just a tiny deficit or even at maintenance level in order to achieve a goal like that. Whereas if you're just trying to lose body fat and you're just trying to kind of maintain muscle mass, you can go a little bit lower. It really kind of depends on the individual. But yeah, that's kind of still regarded as a safe deficit, but not necessarily only through diet, because part of that is also going to be your exercise calories, which is a little bit more challenging to calculate just because everyone burns calories at a different rate depending on their fitness level and what they're doing. But yeah, long story short, yeah.
Ish. We'll say ish.
Ish, yeah.
Last big question I had, what are your thoughts or maybe you even recommend people or to do the continuous glucose monitoring? You mentioned A1C, right? Getting your fasting glucose measured, which everyone should do at their annual. Do you have much experience or any like positive, negative, neutral around those?
Yes. So I've used them a couple of times actually. I never like to recommend anything I haven't tried myself. So I've used a couple of CGMs or continuous glucose monitors on myself, just to kind of get the hang of how they work and all of that from my end. And I do recommend them to some of my clients if they are pre-diabetic or above. If you have healthy, normal A1C, I generally don't recommend using a CGM. I think that they are, important for populations that need them. And so if you don't have diabetes or pre-diabetes, we should probably preserve those CGMs for folks who do. But if you are pre-diabetic and you're wanting to learn about what affects your blood sugar and how, and kind of get experimental with it, they can be a really helpful, very fun tool to play with, to sort of optimize things and improve your blood sugar in real time, which is a very cool tool. So yes, I do sometimes recommend those, and they are very helpful.
My last one, this isn't fair because this is like an off the cuff question, but okay, and this is terrible, but we gotta fix Instagram. The worst piece of nutrition advice that you've seen lately floating around that as an RD you're like, oh God, no, like please no, not this again, or
oh my gosh, honestly, I don't have Instagram anymore.
Smart.
Yeah, so I still have an account on there. I just don't have the app on my phone, and I'm very disconnected from that. I feel like for me it's just distracting, and I have so much that I am working on in my life, so I am not super tuned into that stuff. I do hear about some things from people sometimes. Like people will ask me questions about ridiculous things that they have heard. Oftentimes they're cleanses that are dangerous, and things that I don't know if you've seen this before. A client was showing me this video where it was a cleanse. I can't remember exactly what the requirements were for the cleanse, but there's videos involved where there's like all these little so-called parasites that are coming out of these people's bodies, and there's like all these little worms crawling around and stuff.
Yeah, disgusting. It's like mud coming out of your feet. Scam.
Yeah.
Total. Got to be a scam.
Totally not real. Like there's no way that this is real, but they do such a good job at making you think it is.
Yeah.
And I just like, this person was asking me about it because they thought they should do it. And I was like, please no. Like, A,
those have been
dangerous.
around.
B, this is not real.
That scam's been around forever. They used to sell these little pads. You could just put little stickies on the soles of your feet at night, and it has like little rocks in it or whatever. And then you peel it off in the morning, and it's black. And that's supposed to be all the goo that, like it, the cleansed goo. Now you basically put your feet. Since you don't have Instagram, I'll just grab it to you because it's disgusting. You put your feet in like what you would like a pedicure bucket. And you put this liquid in, and it just like mud forms and like foam. It's like that old, like, you remember like those volcanoes people used to make in the old days?
Yep.
That's what it's like. It's disgusting. So I love that. That's a good one. That's a good one because that's new. So, and I love that. Like in general, like when people ask me about cleanses all the time, and I kind of shake my head. I said I'm distrustful of them. I think it's everything that I've read. Every professional I've ever talked to has said, it's marketing. It's not necessary. Like, okay, that's helpful. I like that one. Well, this has been super duper helpful. Anything that any big thing that I forgot that you're like, oh, the people who, because my audience is obviously people who are moving a lot. They want to move, well, maybe not a lot, but moving more than they were up to a lot. And are like, kind of like you mentioned, like I see people, and in general, everyone these days like wants to feel good, wants to live healthy. And then the body comp is there. It's a goal secondary to those things. But is there anything that we like didn't cover? And that's not a trick question. You could be like, no, I think we got it, but I just wanted to like let you have the last word if there was one.
This is something that I always just try to emphasize, and we did dig into this a little bit, but I always like to just drill it into people's brains because I find it to be really important. As simple as it sounds, nutrition quality versus quantity. So we spend a lot of time thinking about calories and macronutrients and how many grams of protein we're getting a day and all this numerical stuff. We love data, right? But we also need to focus on the actual quality of the foods that we're putting into our body. So most of us are not consuming enough fruits and veggies. Most of us are not eating things like beans, and we're not getting enough nuts or seeds. Like there's the actual quality of the diet that matters so much. And you can have perfect calories, perfect macros, but be doing so while you're consuming like powders as food, like constantly just doing protein powders. And So I always like to just kind of like drive that home as an important thing. The numbers are a helpful tool, but let's not forget about quality, because all of those vitamins and minerals and the fiber and the phytochemicals and all of that stuff, that's what makes you look good. That's what makes you feel good. That's what makes you live longer. So that's not something that I like to neglect as part of the nutrition conversation.
That's very good. Shame on me for not bringing it up sooner. That's excellent. Well, I definitely appreciate your time so much. I know my clients will definitely appreciate this information, and I'm sure we'll talk very soon.
Sounds good. See you later.
Bye.